one in the attic where the ducting could go to each bedroom, so that we can be quite comfortable, although we blow a lot of hot air and burn a lot of gas. It's expensive.
Yeah.
My wife is telling me.
Yeah.
We're trying to cut off the upstairs and not run that furnace.
Yeah.
But it's expensive with all the heat.
Just dissipating out the windows and the walls.
Yeah, yeah. And the house is very substantially built. Elisha Ware. Elisha Ware's father was Ralph Ware and was a farmer in central Illinois, and a very good farmer. And in those days, back in the middle 1800s, the only people who were thought of as well-to-do were the farmers and the bankers. And he was so encouraging of education for boys that wanted to work on the farm and with their hands. And he was a part of the committee that put in the land grant system for colleges, that petitioned Congress to get that land grant system put in.
Neat.
His name was Ralph Ware, and I'm very proud that I went to a land grant school and studied agriculture.
And what did you do with your degree?
Well, I farmed and ranched for a while in Texas until I found that it was probably better to sell farm machinery than buy it. And then when all what I thought was my entrepreneurial money was gone, I just got some lines of equipment and a briefcase and set up equipment selling new technology and farm machinery to farm implement dealers. That's why Connie Kluster and I were such good friends. I called on people like Connie's business and sold them things that went with their business. Connie Kluster, wonderful, wonderful man. He was my best friend up here. And of course, he married a Texas girl, so. And he tried to live in Texas for a while, but then his dad called him back to run the family John Deere dealership, which he transformed from a farm dealership to an industrial dealership, and then set in 4 others around the state, and he did very well. Wonderful man.
Well, that's very interesting. Can you think of one last thing we have time for just one last thing you want to tell us?
Do you have anything in my notes that I might have left you that we haven't covered?
Oh, just going to Holy Island and Fisherman's Island and Steelhead on Stover Street.
Oh, yes. You know, years ago, the Sportsman's Club, now everything is done by the state, but years ago, the Sportsman's Club raised steelhead fingerlings in Stover Creek. And I remember going out there and throwing those little pine or cedar berries in just to watch them rush. And I don't know how many there's fish I killed because they ate those things. And then they would release them at the base of Stover Creek, which, you know, comes right through.
Out by the cement plant there, doesn't it?
Well, where the cement plant used to be. Yeah. And then they would go to the big lake, and then they would come back in the fall, and they would home in on Stover Creek. So the fishing for steelhead right in front of the Belvedere Club was wonderful. And my Uncle Ralph used to love to come in September and fish for steelhead. And those old gentlemen, I remember seeing so many of those old boats were kind of double-ended like a canoe, and they had an engine in the middle, and they drove it with something that stood up like this. The 2 of them would be sitting in there talking with their fish poles out the back and just
down the creek,
putting very slowly along that drop-off on the east side of, I don't know why the Sportsman's Club could do that again. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
And steelhead are a lot better than salmon to catch. It was wonderful. And of course, as a family, we would go down below Holy Island to picnic on our boat. And then some of the family would go by car. And then we would meet at a little creek called Bull Creek, just below Holy Island. Okay. And we would row our supplies in with our dinghy, and we also picnicked on the Jordan at Graves Crossing, just to the south of Graves Crossing. You know, there's that bluff over that nice big hole, and they'd build a fire up there, and we kids would try to catch a fish.
Were those day trips for you? Something you start out in the morning and then be back by sunset?
Oh, I have a wonderful story to tell you about my mother and father's honeymoon.
Okay.
Roy Ranger is an old name in Charlevoix, and Roy Ranger was a guide, a sportsman, an accomplished hunter. And when my father and mother got married in 1910, he took them up the Jordan River on their honeymoon camping. Wow. And they camped several nights. And Mother said that every night they would camp, and Roy would fix their tent and so forth. Then he would go out and catch trout. He didn't go to the Jordan River. He went to little rivulets that came in. She said he'd dig a worm and put it on a stick and just drop it over the edge of this and pull out big trout.
Wow.
and Mrs. Ranger, who lives right next, almost, we can see her house from
Patsy Ranger.
Patsy.
Yes.
Patsy brought us pictures that she found in her family album of Roy Ranger and my father and my mother with, you know, a full-length skirt and all buttoned up and button shoes, going in a boat on their honeymoon.
For a camping trip on their honeymoon.
A camping trip for their honeymoon. So that's the kind of people my dad and mom were. Dad had worked on a ranch in Montana. That's why we had that Montana background and a riding background. Okay. Dad worked on a ranch that had been just a horse ranch, didn't have any cattle. This man put stallions on range mares, then sold horses to the Army remount stations.
Okay.
And I've got a picture or two on Dad's old album with thousands of horses in the background.
Well, thank you very much for coming, Ralph. It's been wonderful.